The first time my father publicly erased me, it was with a smile and a champagne glass raised high. "She's just a security guard," he laughed, waving his hand toward me as if I were a minor detail in the room. "You know how these girls like uniforms." The wedding guests laughed politely. Crystal glasses clinked. Cameras flashed. I stood near the back of the hall, dressed in a fitted black suit instead of a gown, my hair pulled into a neat low bun, my posture straight from habit. I had worked too many events like this to slouch. Too many rooms filled with powerful men who underestimated quiet women. My father didn't even look at me when he said it. And maybe that was why no one noticed how my fingers curled slowly into my palm. Because if they had, they might have sensed what was coming. My name is Amara Cade, and until that night, I thought I understood my place in the world. I was 32 years old, married for 6 years, living in a glass-walled apartment overlooking Victoria Island. I drove my own car. I paid my own bills. I believed I had escaped the small humiliations of my childhood. I believed wrong. On the surface, my life was smooth. Predictable. The kind of life people admired from a distance. My husband, Deo, was charming in public, the kind of man who shook hands firmly and remembered names. He worked in corporate finance, always dressed sharply, always smelling faintly of expensive cologne. He called me my queen in front of people. At home, he called me practical. "You don't need all that softness," he would say when I asked why he never planned surprises. "You're strong. That's what I love about you." I used to take that as a compliment. I worked in private security, not as a guard standing at gates, but as a risk analyst and security consultant. I designed protocols. I assessed vulnerabilities. I trained teams. But most people never asked for details. The word security alone was enough to shrink me in their minds, including my own father. He was a respected businessman, known for his generosity and loud success. He had built a logistics empire from nothing and made sure everyone knew it. Growing up, I was never his pride. I was his responsibility. "You should marry well," he told me once, years ago. "That is security for a woman." I smiled then too. The wedding that night was my cousin's. A lavish affair, white flowers flown in from Nairobi, musicians from Accra, guests from everywhere that mattered. My father moved through the hall like a king, greeting senators, executives, pastors. Deo stood beside him more than beside me. I noticed small things that night. The way Deo leaned in when my father spoke, nodding too eagerly. The way he laughed just a second too late, like he was calculating his responses. The way he didn't correct my father. When someone turned to me and asked politely, "So what exactly do you do in security?" Before I could answer, Deo chuckled. "She handles access control and stuff like that. Very disciplined work. Stuff like that." I felt something crack, but I swallowed it down. I had learned early that reacting too fast only gave people power. The first real sign that something was wrong came 2 weeks later. Deo had always been careless with his phone. He left it charging in random places. He let it ring while he showered. Trust was easy in our home. Until it wasn't. One night, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was on the balcony taking a call. The screen lit up. Is she still clueless? No name. Just the message. I stared at it longer than I should have. When Deo came back in, I didn't mention it. I asked him how his call went. "Work stress," he said, loosening his tie. "You know how it is." I nodded. But that night, I didn't sleep. My mind replayed the message again and again, not with panic, but with curiosity. Clueless about what? After that, things began to shift in small, almost invisible ways. Deo started coming home later. His excuses were smooth, well-rehearsed. He began asking questions that felt strategic. "Do you still have that account your mother left you? Your consultancy, how much access do you really have to those funds? Would you ever consider stepping back from work if things changed?" Things changed how? I answered carefully. Always carefully. Years in security had taught me something crucial. People reveal themselves when they think you are not a threat. So I became smaller, quieter, less curious. And I watched. One afternoon, I ran into Sola, an old friend who worked in corporate law, at a cafe in Ikoyi. She studied my face for a long moment before speaking. "You're thinner," she said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied automatically. She didn't accept it. "You know," she said slowly, "I saw Deo at a restaurant last week." My heart stayed calm. My body did not react. "With clients?" I asked. She hesitated. "With a woman," she said. "Too familiar to be business." I smiled, but it felt like wearing someone else's face. "I'm sure there's an explanation." Sola reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Just be careful." That night, I checked our shared cloud storage. What I found wasn't photos or messages. It was a draft document, a financial plan. My name appeared more times than Deo's. And beside it, in neat bullet points, was a heading that made my throat tighten. Post-separation asset realignment. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I copied the file. And then I deleted the evidence that I had ever opened it. Still, the worst betrayal hadn't revealed itself yet. It came from the man who had first taught me what it meant to feel small. My father. He invited us to dinner the following Sunday. His tone was cheerful, casual. When we arrived, his house was full of voices. Deo sat beside him, discussing future plans. Plans I had never heard. At one point, my father leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, Deo has the mind for expansion. He understands power." Then he looked at me. "You're lucky," he said. "Men like that don't come often." Lucky. Later that evening, as I helped clear the table, I overheard them talking in his study. The door was slightly open. "Once the separation is clean," my father said quietly, "she'll manage. She's resilient. Not emotional like other women." Deo laughed softly. Exactly what I said. My chest felt hollow. They were discussing my life like a concluded deal. I stepped back silently, my footsteps light on marble. That night, lying beside my husband, listening to his breathing, I made a decision. If they thought I was clueless, I would let them. Because in my world, the most dangerous woman is the one everyone underestimates. And somewhere in the city, a camera was already recording the truth. I didn't yet know who else was involved, or how deep the betrayal went, but within days, I would discover that the wedding insult was only the beginning, and that my father had already chosen sides. The plan revealed itself the way poison does, slowly, invisibly, until you realize it's already in your blood. 3 days after my father's dinner, Deo woke up kinder than usual. He made tea. He asked about my work. He even suggested we take a weekend trip. That was when I knew. Men don't suddenly soften unless they are trying to lead you somewhere. "Amara," he said, sitting across from me at the breakfast island, "have you ever thought about simplifying life?" I stirred my tea. "In what way?" "Less stress. Less running around. Maybe fewer accounts to manage." He smiled like he was offering a gift. "I worry you carry too much responsibility." I met his eyes. "You think I should stop working?" "Not stop," he said quickly. "Just transition. You've done well. Let me take some weight." I nodded slowly, pretending to consider it. Inside, my instincts were already mapping exits. That afternoon, I took a half-day off and went to see Bamadil, a forensic accountant I had worked with years earlier on a kidnapping risk case. He owed me a favor. He listened quietly as I explained, sliding the copied document across his desk. "Post-separation asset realignment," he read aloud. "That's ambitious. Can you tell me what it really means?" I asked. He leaned back. "It means your husband plans to make you look cooperative while moving assets into structures you won't control. Joint accounts drained legally. Debts shifted strategically. When the divorce comes, you'll appear financially irresponsible." My pulse stayed steady. "And the timing?" "Soon," he said. "He's already laying groundwork." I thanked him and left. Outside, the city buzzed. Cars honking, vendors shouting, life continuing as if mine hadn't just cracked open. But I felt something else rising beneath the fear. Clarity. The mistress revealed herself 2 days later. Not through a lipstick stain or a late-night call, but through overconfidence. I was at the gym when a woman approached me near the lockers. Tall. Impeccably dressed. Too polished for coincidence. "You're Amara," she said, smiling. "Dao's wife." I didn't flinch. "Yes. I'm Lara," she said. "We work together." The lie slid out too easily. She studied me, waiting for jealousy. I gave her nothing. "Nice to meet you," I said. Her smile tightened. "He didn't tell you about me?" "He tells me many things," I replied. "Enjoy your workout." She walked away unsettled. That was enough. That evening, I ran a discreet background check through channels I trusted. Lara wasn't just a colleague. She was a junior partner at a firm my father had recently invested in. My father. The pieces clicked with a sound that felt like betrayal echoing in a long room. The next week was theater. Dao became generous. He suggested we update our wills, for protection. He asked me to sign documents he said were routine. I signed nothing without copying everything. I began quietly moving my assets, not hiding them, but placing them where they legally belonged. Trusts my mother had set up. Accounts tied to my consultancy, not our marriage. Contracts reviewed. Access tightened. At work, I requested logs. Every camera feed from the event security contracts I supervised. Including my cousin's wedding. I watched my father laugh again. Watched Dao stand beside him. Watched Lara slip through the crowd and exchange a glance with Dao near the service corridor. They thought the cameras were for guests. They forgot who designed the system. Then came the real blow. One night, Dao sat me down, his voice heavy with rehearsed sadness. "Amara, I think we need space." I waited. "My father spoke to a lawyer," he continued. "It might be healthier to separate before things become hostile." I nodded slowly. "If that's what you want." Relief flickered across his face too fast to hide. He reached for my hand. "You'll be okay. You're strong." Strong enough to survive the trap, he meant. Strong enough to disappear quietly. I smiled. "I always am." 2 days later, my father called. "Dao told me you're taking the separation well," he said. "I am," I replied. A pause. "Good. Dignity matters." "Does it?" I asked softly. He ignored the question. "I've arranged something for you. A position. Stable. Security work at one of our warehouses." I laughed once. "A demotion?" "A reality," he corrected. "Be grateful." I thanked him and hung up. Then I forwarded the call, recording to my secure drive. The final piece came from an unexpected place. Sola, my lawyer friend, called me late one night. "Amara," she whispered, "Dao filed preliminary papers. He's accusing you of hiding income." I smiled into the darkness. "Let him." "What do you have planned?" she asked. "Nothing illegal," I said. "Just the truth." I made one last move. I accepted my father's warehouse assignment. I showed up in uniform. Quiet. Observant. And I installed cameras. Because if they wanted to call me just a security guard, I would show them what security really sees. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful African tales. The day before the divorce filing went public, I received an email notification. A news outlet requested confirmation. They had received footage. Footage showing financial misconduct tied to my father's company. And the source, listed simply as internal security audit, compiled by A. Cade. I sat back, heart steady. Because tomorrow, Dao would wake up believing he had won. And by nightfall, the country would know my name. As the headline drafts circulated and my phone began to ring non-stop, I realized the footage didn't just expose my father's company, it implicated someone far more powerful, and the fallout would change everything, including who stood at my side when the truth finally aired. The morning my name appeared on national news, I woke up before my alarm. Not because of anxiety. Because my body already knew something irreversible had begun. The city outside my window sounded different, sharper, restless, as if Lagos itself was holding its breath. My phone lay face down on the bedside table, vibrating every few minutes. I didn't touch it yet. I made tea. I stood by the window. I centered myself. In my line of work, you learn one truth early. When exposure comes, it never hits everyone equally. Some people fall. Some people scatter. And some people reveal who they really are. At exactly 7 a.m., the headline went live. Internal security audit exposes multi-million naira irregularities at Cade Logistics. My picture wasn't there yet. My father's company logo was. I finally picked up my phone. 112 missed calls. From Deo. From my father. From relatives who had never cared before. From numbers I didn't recognize. I answered none. Instead, I turned on the television. The anchor's voice was calm, professional. Sources confirmed that the audit was compiled by a senior security consultant embedded within the organization. Documents show years of asset misdirection, falsified reports, and internal manipulation. I watched footage from cameras I had personally installed. I watched transactions traced cleanly, legally, without accusation, just facts. I watched the truth speak for itself. And then came the name. Amara Cade. The camera cut to my photograph. Not in uniform. Not cropped small. But from a professional profile I had once submitted for an international risk conference. Confident. Clear-eyed. Unmistakable. Deo arrived at the apartment less than an hour later. He didn't knock. He banged. Amara, he shouted. Open this door. I let him shout for a full minute before unlocking it. He stood there, undone. Tie missing. Shirt wrinkled. The charming man from boardrooms replaced by something raw and frightened. What did you do? He demanded. I stepped aside to let him in. Sit down. He didn't. He paced. You destroyed everything, he said. My name is tied to this. Your father made his choices, I finished calmly. His eyes widened. You planned this. Yes. You set me up. No, I corrected. You set yourself up. I just stopped protecting you. He stopped pacing. His voice dropped. Lara is panicking. Investors are pulling out. Your father is calling everyone. I met his gaze. Is that why you married me? Silence. That was answer enough. By noon, the divorce papers he had filed turned into a joke. Every accusation he made against me collapsed under scrutiny. Every attempt to paint me as financially deceptive backfired, because the audit trail was clean, transparent, and legally fortified. The lawyer he hired quietly withdrew. The firm Lara worked for issued a public statement distancing themselves from individual misconduct. She blocked me everywhere. I didn't need to chase her. She was already falling. My father called that evening. This time, I answered. Amara, he said, and for the first time in my life, his voice shook. Why are you doing this? I held the phone away slightly, letting the silence stretch. Do you remember the wedding? I asked. What wedding? The one where you said I was just a security guard. He exhaled sharply. That was nothing. It was everything, I replied. Because you meant it. I protected you, he insisted. I gave you stability. You used me, I said quietly. You assumed my silence was weakness. His voice hardened. You've embarrassed this family. I smiled softly. No. I exposed it. He hung up. That was the last time he ever spoke to me directly. The investigation widened. Regulators stepped in. Accounts were frozen. Not mine, but theirs. My father resigned, for health reasons. Deo's firm placed him on indefinite leave. Friends who once invited us to exclusive dinners suddenly became unreachable. Power is loud when it arrives. But it leaves quietly. 3 weeks later, the final divorce hearing took place. Deo sat across from me, smaller somehow. The judge reviewed the documents. Mrs. Cade, she said, You have demonstrated full financial transparency and independent income. She turned to Deo. Mr. Cade, your claims are unsubstantiated. The gavel struck. Clean. Legal. Final. Outside the courtroom, Deo stopped me. I never thought you were capable of this, he said. That, I replied, was your biggest mistake. I walked away without looking back. The final twist came a month later. A global security firm reached out. They had followed the case closely. Not for the scandal. For the precision. They offered me a leadership role, regional director, West Africa. Not because I was betrayed, but because I had responded with intelligence instead of emotion. On my first day, I stood before a room of executives. They listened. They respected me. No one asked if I was just anything. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that wedding. The laughter. The champagne. My father's careless words. And I smile. Because the world eventually saw what they refused to see. That security isn't about standing at the door. It's about seeing everything clearly, and knowing exactly when to act. Never underestimate the quiet woman in the room. Never mistake patience for ignorance. And never build your future on someone you think you've erased. Because one day, you might look up and see her on the news. Standing exactly where you thought she'd never reach the end.